I grew up Christian. I grew up going to church on Sundays and celebrating Easter. I recognize that I have a fundamental bias when it comes to religious studies, but as a sociology major, I've also become comfortable with the process of recognizing these biases and challenging everyday norms. So, as the term has progressed, my understanding of religion as a social phenomenon has admittedly become flexible. For my final project, I thought it might be interesting to look at the intersection of family tradition and religion and see if there are ways to stretch my traditional association with family and religion. And when I think of my family, the tradition I'm immediately drawn to is our homemade coffee cakes that we deliver to friends and family as a Christmas treat. But what really drew me to analyze this tradition was my interest in ritual and religion. So I seek to use my family's coffee cake ritual as an entry point for understanding how people, religious or not, can find religious adjacent meaning and function in society. This task necessitates some background information on ritual and religious practice. In a sociological context, you will be hard pressed to find a consistent definition of ritual and its function. While I think most sociologists could agree that rituals are comprised of patterns, actions, and meaning, I will draw from religious studies scholar Dr. Catherine Bell and sociologist Ronald Grimes to provide a foundation of ritual that's applicable to my argument. In her book, Ritual Theory, Ritual Practice, Bell explains ritual as the definitive component of the various processes that constitute religion, society, and culture. It is a type of critical juncture wherein some pair of opposing social or cultural forces comes together. This could be a ritual integration of tradition and change, order and chaos, and so on. Often, rituologists view ritual and tradition as synonymous, but if we box ourselves into believing that rituals just are what they are or have always been a certain way, we limit our ability to view rituals as dynamic and constructive. This perspective is reflective of Grimes' study of rituals. He argues that ritual isn't always purely traditional, it's also invented and creative. This allows us to view rituals historically and interpret them tacitly. When knowledge of ritual is tacit, it must be reconstructed, improvised, or reinvented in each new enactment. I argue that this interpretation allows criticism, creativity, and reconnection with vitality, similar to Bell's argument that in defining religion loosely, we can mold, challenge, and reinvigorate our understanding of it. As it relates to religion, rituals allow believers to express and reaffirm their belief systems. The Encyclopedia of Behavioral Medicine explains that they convey information regarding the commitments, beliefs, and values of the individuals performing the ritual and link them to larger religious tradition. They reaffirm the religious frameworks individuals use to conceptualize and understand life and thus endow a sense of meaning. Bell presents the common sociological notion that ritual is used to explain the social existence and influence of religious ideas. In this context, religious ideas are the basis of religion and born of pseudoscientific explanations or emotional experiences, and ritual is the necessary but secondary expression of these mental orientations. Further, social scientists like Henri Hubert and Marcel Mauss demonstrated how ritual activities effectively sacralize things. This is an idea I want to circle back to towards the end of my story. You'll notice that rituals are an important pillar of religious belief and practice. It's important to note that I'm basing this analysis on my personal definition of religion, which is a commitment to a set of values based on a system of beliefs one deems important or worthy. Followers find sincere meaning in this commitment and can use it as a tool for understanding experiences, either personal or impersonal, or quotidian or remarkable. Religion is what makes us interpret the mundane in an elevated light. So, what about rituals performed for a seemingly secular purpose? Here's where I want to introduce the story of my family's coffee cakes. But what's so special about these coffee cakes, you might ask? Well, I was able to call up my mom to help me explain their history and significance.
Okay, so when I first married your father in 2001, we spent our first Christmas with his family, Mary Beth and Rusty. And Christmas morning, we came downstairs and she had these amazing coffee cakes that she had made from scratch. She had a whole bunch of the same coffee cakes that were in the dining room set aside. And I was like, what's going on with these? And she said, I give them to all the neighbors on Christmas morning. She got that tradition from her mother. So she grew up with these same coffee cakes. So through the years, when we lived in Atlanta, I started learning how to make them. And then I started doubling how many coffee cakes we would make so that I could give them to our friends and neighbors.
As she said, the coffee cakes have remained an important tradition, but the process is also ritualistic. Some aspects have historically remained the same, like the recipe, made of just cream cheese, butter, biscuit mix, milk, raspberry preserves, and confectioner's icing. The biscuit mix is cut into the cream cheese and butter, followed by milk, which helps it take shape into a dough. The dough is then kneaded on a floured surface, rolled out into an oval shape, and placed on a greased pan. 2-inch slits are cut along the side of the dough, and the middle is filled with raspberry preserves. The dough is then braided over itself to form a Christmas tree-like shape. It's placed in the oven for 12 to 15 minutes, and then topped with confectioner's icing made of powdered sugar and milk. As Grimes laid out, traditions can be rituals, but the two are not entirely dependent on each other. While my family's coffee cakes are a tradition, the process has not necessarily remained traditional as years progress. The ritual is dynamic, and integrations of tradition and change can be seen when my family moved from Atlanta to New Jersey 8 years ago. In fact, our first few years in New Jersey, we didn't even perform the ritual. As our community grew, we were able to reinvigorate and redefine the coffee cakes. For instance, the candied red and green cherries we would decorate the cakes with in Atlanta were not as easily accessible up north, so we found a suitable replacement. The ritual served as a vehicle for connection as we scrapped our old list of recipients and carefully crafted a new one. Similar to Grimes's theoretical framework, our ritual is both historical and modern, traditional and reinvented. And while the ritual process has shifted, the framework and meaning remains constant. There's also an aspect of world building and a mythology to this ritual. In this narrative, the coffee cake ritual began with my great grandmother and has been passed all the way down to me. By keeping the ritual alive, we maintain an important aspect of our family mythos. But there's also a certain degree of agency in maintaining the narrative, which can be seen in who we choose to receive the cakes. The families and friends on our delivery list are all people we deem worthy of receiving a coffee cake. This delivery then becomes a representation of our commitment to friendship, but also our acknowledgement of shared values and interests between us and the recipients. Year after year, the people on our list have come to trust that we will deliver the cakes. And this trust is reminiscent of relationships one might foster in a religious context, as through commitment, you are rewarded with tools for understanding and fostering community. This ritual also persists as my family finds deep meaning in the process. At the forefront is an opportunity to spend time with each other, collecting the ingredients, baking the cakes, wrapping them in foil, and decorating them with bows. But there's also comfort in knowing that despite what the holiday season brings, regardless of who is in town or how old we've gotten, we will always make the coffee cakes. This can be compared to finding meaning through religion. In our text, Michelle Lolwicka defined religion as a concept that brings into focus various systems of beliefs, stories, and behaviors through which people create and discover meaning in life. This meaning we've attached to the process of baking coffee cakes is also part of what separates it from any other instance of baking, a separation of the sacred versus the mundane, such as in Durkheim's claims that there is an intimate connection between function and meaning in ritual practice. My family has a mutually shared sense of devotion towards the coffee cakes because we've recognized its ability to foster trust, community, and serve as a reflection of our values. This ritual is worthy of devotion. As I considered this analysis, I wouldn't argue that this ritual functions as a religion in itself, different from other case studies we've looked at, like devotions to sports teams or celebrities. I believe it functions instead as religious adjacent expression. In other words, the implications of the ritual are applicable to my definition of religion. For instance, the ritual demonstrates commitment to values and beliefs my family deems important, like community, trust, and shared family history, and our devotion to the coffee cakes is elevated compared to any other instance of baking because of the meaning we've attached to it. But the ritual is not all encompassing. It's a situational example of a source of deeper meaning and is reflective of the process of how people find deeper meaning through religion. Perhaps it's even reflective of the reasons why people devote themselves to religious ritual, for a sense of security and reinforcement of a personal mythos. And I argue that religious expression can be viewed in a different light than religious identity. At the end of the day, while I can articulate why my analysis is useful for the reasons previously stated, the analytical process has honestly left me still with questions. I even find myself questioning if I truly believe my own definition of religion. But I think this is good. It's reflective of our ability to question and criticize, mold and redefine, which is one of my most important and applicable takeaways from this course.